put the servo together, we're going to take the shaft and put it in the vise. Hold it. Then we're going to take our plate. We're going to put that on there, like so. Okay, we're going to put a felt in the hole first. We're going to put a little bit of lubrication on it. Drop that down. Then we're going to take our cup washer. You can see our cup, it's flat that side. We put the cup down, that supports the felt. Drop that in. Then we're going to take our bearing surface there. We're going to put that in next. Take our soft hammer and just tap that down a little bit. So the CAD plating makes it a little bit stiff. Let's tap it all the way home. Normally it's not that stiff, but nothing's untoward there. Then we're going to take our race. I'm going to give that a little bit of lubrication. What I like to do is squeeze the grease in from inside. It's like packing a bearing. You can see that coming out of there, right through there. Make sure all the balls are lubricated. See that coming out. Then we'll wipe a bit around the outside. We'll put that in. Push that down. That gives that shaft the support. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to put the arms on, the activating to the arms that go to the master cylinder. You can see that that goes on there. I've changed the piece that we took apart. When we took it apart, the rubber piece was broken over, so we're going to put a new rubber in and just give it a bit of lubrication. I just use that. You can see that squeeze in there, like that. Then we're going to take our washer. Yeah. Put that on. Put the other arm on there, like so. You can see those two arms there. They move. And we put this on. This holds the second race for the arms. Goes on there. And again, we're going to have to tap it just a little bit. So we just spin it and tap it. And that's all the way home. The arms still move. Let's give it a little. You could hear that go all the way home. Then we take this ball race, squeeze the grease through around the balls, and we put that in there like so. On the back of our arms have a race for the balls to run in. Let's put it on there. So, just to demonstrate, I'm going to put some grease on each one of these ramps there. For the purpose of demonstration, I'm going to put the balls on first. I wouldn't do it this way normally, but you'll be able to see where the balls should sit. See, they're right at the bottom of the ramp there. And I'll put the ring on there. Now I'll put the spring on. And I'm going to take my arm. Inside this arm there's a bearing that you should, you can run your finger. If it feels not rough or graunchy, then it's fine, we'll just use it. And that slips down over there. Then what I do is I take the spring at that stage and I just slip it under there. And that's that. The final thing, and probably one of the important things about this job, is to assemble this onto the car. You need to be very sure that both of the servo plates pick up on the pins. Now we're going to demonstrate this to you, but the most important thing is to give yourself enough room at which to do it. And to achieve this, we take these two lock nuts. you can see that the lock nut, the outside lock nut, is flush with the shaft. I'm going to bring the bottom or the inner lock nut up to it, and I'm going to nip it. I'm just going to nip like so, and that is going to allow me to move the shaft like so when I'm trying to line up these holes there onto the gearbox. And that's very important. That is one of the most important things when you're putting the thing back together. You must make this outside lock shaft flush with there. That allows you to tighten the bolt, but gives you this amount of movement there to get the pins located. And we'll go into that a little further when we're ready to assemble. Here's the servo. It's now ready to put the lining onto it, and I'm going to demonstrate how to change a lining and the differences you might find with linings. There are two types of servo lining plates, the plates that carry the servo lining. You can see this one is a solid steel. On this one, you can see it has small raised areas, and this is a spring plate, what they call a spring plate. This gives a little more cushion to the lining as it hits the steel plate of the servo. You can see this has suffered some distress. Somebody's over drilled the hole, and there, and some of these are loose. When you get one like this, it really needs to be addressed. You don't need to ignore it. These are available. They're somewhat difficult to rivet on. This plate here, you can see this ring. Somebody took this apart and they've put it together wrong. This collar there should indeed be on this side. This one is incorrect. Now why this happens is people don't know how to open these up. You see, you have 3 holes there in the plate, but what you need is 9 holes because you have 9 rivets holding it. So what they tend to do is take it apart by undoing that. The best way to take it apart is to take a hammer handle like this, strike it, and you can see that that spring has come out. What that does is if the servo is left loose or comes loose, this springs to give you more push in with the servo. But it also allows you to go around, and you can see that hole appears another rivet, and another rivet, and of course 3 holes, 9 rivets, so you move it 3 times. And then when you're done, you just push that down like so. And you just take that, strike it, and that takes it apart. That's all you need to do. What I'm going to do is I'm going to demonstrate with another plate. This plate has a lining on it. And I'm going to drill it out and show you what we're left with. And I'm just going to go around and drill the heads off all of the rivets, and then I'm going to tap them out. So, one of the things that happens to you when you're drilling out is if the rivet isn't very tight, then the rivet may very well start to turn in there. And that only leaves you one thing left to do, and that is to take a punch that's the correct size. And you can tell whether the punch is indeed the correct size by just running it through one of the rivets that came out, holding it in the vise, or open the jaws on the vise just enough, put the punch inside there, and tap it. One of the problems, of course, is you're only tapping on this very small area of steel that's very flexible. So if it doesn't come out straight away, you may need to get a better punch. So we're going to need a better punch. What we're going to use is we're going to use a tapered punch, which will put more pressure in the center. Now that pushed that out of there. You can see the rivet's gone. You can see we didn't bend the steel. And we'll go on to the next one. So that gave us the servo lining removed. Nothing's loose. It's in good shape. Check all of them. Everything's good. So we're ready to put a lining on this. So we'll carry on. Take our lining. First thing we want to do is to check there's no cracks across here. Quite often these things get damaged. So we're going to lay the lining onto the plate. We're going to locate an open hole. That is one of the 3 that are open, and we'll slip the rivet in like so. Now we're going to have to support this, so we're going back to our vise. We've got a pin punch in the vise. We're going to sit that on there. Now this helps if you've got some kind of thing on your body to rest it on, and I do, so we're going to just take it there. I can rest it. I've got 2 hands free. And you heard the note change. When you hear the note change, it's time to quit. You don't want to be banging and beating on that small thin piece of steel. So we'll go that one. Hear the note change. That's the last one. What I'm going to do is just open it once more, turn it around and close it away from the rivets, and that'll just confuse the next person, but there you go. So we're ready to flat this. What we do now is we take a full sheet of emery cloth on a piece of glass and we'll go across it, which will make this surface flat to go along with our other surface. Earlier in the program we discussed the damage to this spring cover when we were stripping the servo apart, and you can see that this is all beaten in at this point, and this has suffered badly. The Ferodo disc is missing off there. The disc is used to hold the servo in a position, so once the brakes have gone on forwards, the Ferodo disc holds it in that position so that every time you use the brake it isn't this long wind up, and that's what that's for. There's no problem the fact that this is off. You can buy them separate and you can glue them back on. That's not a problem. But this damage in here that somebody's done taking the servo down is what the problem is. These servo spring covers are very expensive, and you really need to be very, very careful when you take them down. You can see with the new one, if I push down in the middle, how that just flips right up, which is what that's designed to do. This one's just like an old tin can, there's nothing. So we're going to change this for that reason. And if your servo line spring cover is like that, I'm afraid it's had it, it's history. So we're going to put the new one on. So we'll take our lining that we flatted, we'll put it on there, so. Then we'll take our cover, and in there you can just see a lip in there, and that's where the cover has to sit down into. And we're going to go all the way round, just spin it around. So I'm going to take some electrical tape. And I'm going to start it about just over the edge. You can see there how I've done it. I've just gone, you can see the raised portion over the edge, and I'm going to pull it around, but I'm going to pull it very, very tight. And I'm just going to go once around there, and then I'm going to go down just a little bit lower. You can see I've just gone down a little lower. It's really, and at that point I'm going to stop. That's sufficient to keep the oil out. You don't need to worry. And then we're going to put this clip on. This is a Jubilee clip, and what it does is it just squeezes in slightly the spring cover to hold it in place. There's one thing to consider when we're doing this. If the car is a left-hand drive car, this part of the clip would hit the linkage that runs underneath the servo. This would be the servo on the side of the gearbox. If we imagine the gearbox here, the levers would be up, and that's the way those 2 arms would come back to the master cylinder. So if I was to leave the clip where it is now, it would boink against the rod, the crossover rod for the brake pedal. So I'm going to take it up. Although this car is a right-hand drive and there's no real worries, I'm just going to take it up for the purposes of demonstration. And I'm just going to tighten it up a bit. Now I'm not going to over-tighten it because it's going to sink into the cover a little bit anyway. And all it's doing is offering some support to the cover against that lip that you saw as we were putting it together. I push it down to the edge of the servo. I just take it in till it touches and then half a turn just to make it tight. And you can see there quite clearly that that spring cover is going to work. It's going to lift the servo off. Of course, when the servo is activated, you can see that come up. And it goes like that. That's exactly what happens. That's how the servo works. You can see how it slows as the thing comes down and pulls around. And that's the servo. That's now ready to go on the car. These are the master cylinders, but there's a couple of things of note that I wanted to show you. One is the damage to this thread in the fitting. This was where the high pressure pipe went into it, and you can see there that they've rounded off the thread, which made it very difficult to come out. So we're going to change this whole fitting when we put it back on. The other thing to take note of is this pin. This pin is seized up tight. So what that means is that the pin has been riding on the bracket that supports it rather than on this bearing surface where it should be. I'm going to try and tap it out, see if it's going to come out. It's somewhat tight, so I think I'll leave that until we've taken the master cylinders off the linkage. What we're going to do is we'll take the rubbers and we'll send them back up the shaft like so. Take a pair of pliers and we'll go on that clip there. We'll squeeze the clip, take that off, and then we'll carefully pull that master cylinder out. Now you can see the piston in there just beginning to come out. We'll put that to one side. Take our screwdriver, we'll ease this rubber back. You can see those clips there. Take our pliers, squeeze that. Oops. Saw the piston shoot out of there. So we'll slip our clips off there. Take our clip off there. Now what we need to do is look at this. This pin floats in there. There's a grease fitting, and there's a row of needle rollers there and there. If everything was moving okay in here, which it is, we don't need to worry about that too much. We're not going to bother. But we still have our concern with this pin. What we're going to do is we're going to bang that right out, and we'll wash it, and then I'll clean that pin up, and I'll show you that when we're fitting the master cylinder back up. Another thing you need to know about, you can see the colour of that fluid is pretty bad. It's just as well we're doing it. You can see down in that cylinder it's beginning to pick up, and it's not far short of leaking, I'm sure. And we'll empty the fluid out. Now what a lot of people do with these is they take these two areas and they put them in the vise. Then they take a wrench and they try and undo this. This cap is steel and the housing is aluminum, and the steel grows inside the aluminum. And one of the tricks that you need to know about this is that if you take a hammer you do that, you can undo that just by hand. and you haven't broken the cylinder and you haven't done any damage. There's the spreader for the seal. The seal's in there. And just below there is a valve. And what that valve's designed to do is to stop the seal banging down hard, going into the holes in the cylinder, and then jamming off so that the fluid can't get in there. So we'll just slip that out and I'll show you the holes. And you can see the holes in the bottom. And that valve, you can see the indents, stops the seal from being forced into those holes. And that's important that that goes back in. Take the small cylinder, pull that out of there. You can see the colour of that fluid. And you can see there's not any sleeve in there. So I'm going to take this one. I grip it firmly, like so. I'll just show you that it's not loose at the beginning. You can undo that. Again, you've got the spreader and the seal. You can see the muck and the dirt. It was time to do them. Although I don't think they're particularly old. I'll give the system a good clean out. We'll work away on this valve, get it out of there. But we'll make a decision as to whether we're going to put new or re-sleeved master cylinders on there. And we'll do that on the fit up. Now we're going to wash everything up and get it ready to put everything back together. First thing I'm going to show you is the difference in the seals that you get inside a master cylinder kit. You can see there that there's a T-shaped, if you like, seal and a more like a cover type seal. And then inside the master cylinders you could get two different pistons. You can have a piston with a flange inside there, or you can have a piston with just a straight opening. If you've got the piston with the straight opening, which is the old seal I took off, is the T-shaped one. But this one gives you the option to take it open. You can see there's a spring clip there, and I just pulled that straight out of that piston there. So this seal would be used in there. You'd put that on there, and then you'd just push that back in like so. But this, the one that we're working on today, is this piston. But I'm just demonstrating the differences that you'll find. Just take a bit of grease, spread it around the inside of the seal, push it over. You could see that the other one was much easier to put on, but this is the way it is. Okay, so we've got that T-shaped seal on that piston now. Put that to one side. We're dealing with this size, which is the small master cylinder. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the valve, or the washer, the steel washer with the pressings on it, or the little lumps on it. We're going to drop that inside the master cylinder. You can see that that's just sitting down there on blocking the holes. You can see that it doesn't block the holes, it allows the holes for the fluid to transfer through the holes. So we just put that in there, nothing special. Then we take the seal. This is the main seal. This is the seal that when the pressure that the servo puts on the piston, this is what provides the seal and forces the pressure to the brakes. Now you can see how it has a cut or a shape in it there, and it's flat there. Well, the flat goes down to the steel washer, and you're just going to push it down, take a screwdriver, and you just push the thing all the way home, like so. And this is the end cover. You can see there's a seal, an O-ring on the end there, and we're just going to, that's the old one, we're going to slip that off and discard that. Take the new one, we'll slide that. Actually, it's better if we put this washer on first. In the kits, they don't provide this washer anymore, so I'm afraid you're on your own. I haven't been able to find a number with the right size washer, and I tend to use the same one. The O-ring is actually the seal, the washer is just the cushion for the end cap to go on over. So make sure the washer's on, then push the O-ring on. You can put a little bit more rubber grease, just to, as it goes in, it gives it something to slide on so that it doesn't grip it and then perhaps mark it. So that's ready. And what we're going to do now is we're going to take our piston and we're going to push it up the end of the cylinder. Of course, it's the small end. I'm going to put a little bit of lubrication on there. One of the problems when you're bleeding these brakes is this piston might have a tendency to stick in the seal. So you want to get a fair amount of thing. You could see how I pushed that in there, just boom. You have a choice at this point. It's probably better just to slip the clip in now. And why we're going to do that, and you'll see in a moment, is it keeps the piston in there while we're assembling the other end. You can see that's gone into the groove. So now you can see in there, you can see the piston sticking through the seal. It's imperative that we keep the piston through the seal while we're putting it in, because we have this expander. This expander is going to go on there, and that holds the seal not firmly against the seat because it has to move, but it does keep its shape, and it does allow it to move and still keep it there. So this is important that the piston stays in, because if we tighten the end cap and the piston isn't in there, it's going to distort that rubber seal, and then we're not going to be able to get the piston in. So I take a socket, just take a small socket, and I push it up inside there, like so, which keeps the piston through. So we're going to drop the spring in, and then our seal retainer, if you like, hold it there. Then we're going to push it all down inside, like so. Now you can see the piston has come right back to the clip, and that was the reason for putting the clip there, because otherwise the piston would have popped out. So I'm just going to tighten the end cap with a wrench, pull it round. Of course, the O-ring makes the seal, so all we're doing is tightening it so it can't fall out. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it to the side, and I'm going to prime the cylinder. And the reason for this is, if we don't prime it, when we get it on the car, we might have an awful time bleeding it. But by running some fluid through it now, it can save a lot of problems once it's on the car. So what we're going to do is just carefully squirt a little bit of fluid right inside either hole. It doesn't matter. All you're trying to do is get the air out and get the fluid in. You can see the bubbles popping out of there as the fluid goes down on that one. And we'll just carry on with this till we get the thing to the point that there's no more room for fluid. Okay, we're going to do the big master cylinder. As you know, there's two sizes, and we're going to do the large. It's exactly the same as the other one. Again, they offer us two different seals. We're going to use the one that's in there, that one. You can see that. And we're just going to hook it off like so. We'll take the new one. Take a little rubber grease, slide it around, make it a little easier. And we're just going to push that on over there, like so. Put that to one side. Take our master cylinder and our valve, and we're just going to drop that in over there, flat. Then we're going to take our seal, Put that well down inside again. Push it down. Take a bit of grease for that piston. Have far less trouble with the large piston master cylinder. It's much easier for some reason. The other one. We're just going to stick that through. I'm going to show you, just push that right in, no problem. Put our clip in. Take the two ears, needle nose pliers. Clip that in. Same socket, put that up inside. Just enough to hold it through. Then we're going to put our spring in. Take our seal holder, put that in. I'm going to slip the O-ring off. New O-ring on. Put a bit of grease on that. Send that all the way home. No problem. Take our socket out. You can see piston goes in and out. It's not jammed or anything, everything's cool. And we'll put it in our vise. Tighten the end on. Then we're just going to prime that, and then we'll mount it onto the linkage, and that'll be the master cylinders ready to go on the car when we've got them on the linkage. Just get rid of the air. When we took the stripped the master cylinders, I demonstrated that this pin had seized up in this piece of linkage, so this time we're going to free it up. So I'm going to just ease it into the vise, nothing too tight, just to support us. And I'm going to just knock the pin out of there. I'm just going to so you can see quite clearly that that was seized up. Well, that's not a good thing. Do that. Take some of the emery cloth. When you think you've got the pin clean enough, we can try it in the hole. We seem to have nothing seized there now. Put that in there. I'll spread it around a bit. I think we've solved that problem. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to take the boots off this bit of linkage here. And we're going to change these boots. They're not in bad shape, but we've got new ones here, so we may as well change them. We're going to take the screwdriver, try not to put it through our hand, like that. We're just going to ease it off there. It's better if they're older and more rotten, because then they come off easily. But just pull it off the washer, like so, that one. Ease it around. There. So they're off. But anyway, what we're going to do is we're going to spread this a bit, like so, and push it on there. Might just have a little bit of lubrication to help us. You see what I did there, I pushed it through, kept the whole thing together, so I didn't have to fight every washer. And now I'm going to push the outside piece out. I've got to now put this lip into that groove, so do that. You can see that. I'm going to now roll it back on itself so that when I take the clip out to put this rod in there, it's going to be easy. So I roll that back like so. That gives me some space to work. I have to take this because it has to be on there as well. Roll that around. Do the same with this end. I'm going to take the master cylinder, turn it up on end, take the linkage. There's got to be a little bit of a trick shot here because we have to take the clip out without totally losing the piston, push the rod in, like so, put the clip back in, you can see how fluid's coming out, but that doesn't matter if we'll put some more in if we think it's necessary. And you can see that that clip's right in there holding that washer. So we're going to do the small one. And you heard that clip go in. Click is in, and the clip is in the groove. The washer's there. This one's in good shape still. So we'll lay that down like so. Then we're going to take our boot there's the master cylinder and they're ready to go on. First thing we're going to do is put the support or the shaft for the linkage of the brake master cylinders through the hole. This is the one we freed up, and we're going to push it right into the hole like so. You see that comes through there. Now this is held on with the fork. I'm going to put the fork up and start the bolt like so. Once we've done that, I'm going to lift up the top master cylinder and I'm going to pick up the pipe, the high pressure pipe, and put that into the fitting. I'm going to wiggle the master cylinder and wiggle the fitting till we get a nice contact like so. Now I'm going to screw that in as far as I possibly can with my fingers because there is no distance that you can turn a wrench. With the fitting in the top master cylinder, we're going to lift the bottom one up, and we're going to put the fitting into that one. Everything's loose still. We're not putting any bolts in until we get these fittings started and as tight as we can with our fingers. This is the most difficult part of this job because you've got to get everything straight in. We're going to put this plate up. I'm going to hang the grease nipple slot onto the grease nipple. This is the bolt with the support for the handbrake linkage. That's going to go through the plate. Then we're going to put the spacer. We're going through the other side of the bracket, and we're going to use a washer and a half nut. That's what I'm going to do now. That gets everything supported. And now we're going to lift up the master cylinder bracket. I have to align the shaft with the linkage. Like so. Then I'll nip up the bolt somewhat. Next thing I'm going to do is put a bolt through the back end of this bracket, like so, keep the whole thing together. Put a flat washer on the inside. Saw the shaft come through there, got a bolt, we've got the nipple through. Now we'll go on to the other side of the the other end of the bracket. Bolt in there. Everything's left loose. We don't do anything up tight until such time as everything is in, because if you do anything up tight, you're not going to be able to align everything. So we're going to put our long bolts now through the top master cylinder. One. Pull this bit of linkage down, the rear compensate linkage. We'll wiggle the master cylinder around a bit, like so. Got that one through. Put the last master cylinder bolt in. Through, like so there. Once we've got all the bolts in, you can then start to tighten all the nuts up. You wouldn't think a 1/2 inch bolt could be so long, would you? Now we're going to put this piece of linkage back in there. We're going to put our 1/4 bolt in there. We're now ready to tighten up the fittings. Make sure they're good and tight, and fit the feed hoses to the master cylinders. We're going to tighten up the fork that we put in first, and that will complete the master cylinders. Okay, slip the feed pipes onto the fittings. These are the pipes from the reservoirs. And then we'll just clamp those up with the Jubilee clips. I use a 1/4 drive socket to do this. The good thing about the hex on the hose clamp makes life a lot easier, especially in these tight quarters. One thing when you're using a socket, you've got to be careful not to over tighten the clip. So that's that. Okay, you'll need to put the master cylinder return spring on, like that, on that bar. That's all that's bar's for, and that is there. That completes the installation of the master cylinders into the chassis. When we put the servo on, we'll put the rest of the linkage on. When you're ready to fit the servo, carefully lift it up through the chassis so that you don't damage that spring cover. You're going to lift it on, line up the holes and the plate like so. Then we're going to turn the 2 nuts at the end to line up the inner plate. The servo's up, so I'm going to push the levers up out of the way. Give me more room, and I'm going to tighten this bolt here, all the time keeping the servo in. I check to make sure my servo's still locked on the pins. I'm keeping pressure with my 2 fingers there to make sure it doesn't fall out, and I tighten the bolt in. Once I'm sure that everything's in, you can hear that clunk. I know that it's in, still holding it in. I tighten the centre bolt. It is going to take you a fair amount of time to wind all that thread in. You tighten that up really quite tight. Just as an added check, we can bring it down, and we can see that floats on those pins beautifully. Okay, we're going to join up the linkage, the operating linkage at the top. That pin is in. You can see that's on there. We put that through there. Do a little bit of wiggling. We're got our 2 pins in. and we're ready to put our horseshoes on. Put our clip in there. Okay, we'll put the piece of linkage, the pin and the horseshoe from the compensator rod. We'll tighten that up. Okay, tightening up the brake pedal rod. Those two are now tight. We'll now put the servo actuating rods on. Do that, we'll bring the servo around there and we'll run the rods through. The first rod we'll put on is the reverse rod. Remember, I took this off with the... You can bring it right down, so it doesn't come this far down in its natural travel. Put that in there. We'll tighten up the two bolts into the reverse linkage. Then we'll bring the servo round like so to make sure that the rods are on the right side. That is, this lever here is closest to the servo, so it has to go on the inside of the other rod. So let's put our pin in there. Net that up. We're now ready to join the rods up to the master cylinder, which we'll do now. Okay, when we fit the bushings for the master cylinder end of the rod, we have to decide which side gets the short spacer and which side gets the long. Because this rod is closest to the centre of the engine, it gets the short one there, like so. We can put that into the arm. We line up the bolt, put that through. Put our washer on. And our nut. Just start it, we're not going to tighten it up yet because we need to spread this just a little bit for our hole. We're going to put the long bushing on this side and the short bushing on there. Wiggle that through, put our nut and washer on. Now we have both our bolts tight, we're ready to do our on-stop adjustment. Put the on-stop through on top of the chassis. I have to put a couple of bolts into it. There. So you need to adjust the on-stop so that it's close enough to the arm at this point here, so that if this piece of linkage was to break, that the servo would activate. But you don't want it too far away so that it wouldn't activate at all. So we'll leave that about there. So we tighten up the on-stop, and that's correctly adjusted. Bring the handbrake cable through the chassis and join it onto the linkage. Okay, put the clevis pin through, put the split pin or cotter pin in, bend that around. Join the front end of the pedal return spring onto the pedal and join the other end of the spring to the on-stop. To adjust the servo, we turn the prop shaft and we watch the two lock nuts turn at the end of the servo shaft. Now we'll loosen the lock nut on the servo shaft. So that's loose, and we tighten up the inner nut, turning the prop shaft to see
if the servo turns. Keep tightening it up until the servo begins to turn. You can see there the servo is just beginning to pick up. You can see the rods take up the slack, so we'll go up just a little more to prove the point. You see the servo is now turning. You can see the arms are activating. So what we're going to do is we are going to let off the inner nut 2 flats. We're going to go 1, and then we'll do it another flat, like so. The servo is now free, it's not tied up, and we'll bring the outer nut in to meet the inner nut that we've adjusted with. You just see that movement there. So we hold that nut, we'll take it back, that, and we lock the 2 nuts, not letting the inner one move. That's the correct adjustment for the servo. You can see the nuts are turning and everything is free, so we're happy with that. That's the servo adjusted.
Because the adjuster is seized up, these 2 pieces are seized solid, we're going to take it off and we'll put a freshly carded one on there. To take it off, we have to undo the bolts from outside the back of the backing plate. These bolts are somewhat special. You can see they have a nipple on the end. The nipple on the end stops these adjusting pieces, the sliders, from coming out. These 2 pieces there are seized up, so we're going to change that out. There's one thing to remember, there's a couple of spacers in here, and if they fall out you've got to be sure they go back in or it'll bend the backing plate in towards the adapter plate. When we fit the adjuster, we're going to put it through. You'll have to hold on to the bottom thing because this will slide right out, and we'll put the bolt in. We'll just put these in finger tight, make sure they still slide, sure the space is in there. The reason we're only going to leave them finger tight is there's a certain amount of movement there, and when we fit the shoes to the drum we will leave this loose enough to move, and that will be part of the setup of the shoes, but we'll get into that when we fit the shoes. So we're now ready to fit the wheel cylinder. We put the linkage through, and I'm going to start the fitting first like I did with all the other things. I'm going to take the fitting all the way in, give you a maximum amount thing. There's always small amounts of wrench movement then. And we push that all the way in. I'm then going to fit the bolt. I fitted a new lock tab to the bolt. I'm going to put that in. I'll put that all the way in, like so. Have to bend up the lock tab ears. Let's take a pair of, that secures that. So we're going to put the piece of linkage, the compensator linkage, line that up, a clevis pin. Take our split pin, through the hole. Bend that around. Just cut the tail off. Bend the tail around. So, and we can put the rubber boot on. Put our through. Put that over the lip. So, take our two S's. Put that one in there. You've got an S on the rod and an S on the backing plate. And that's the linkage. We just have to put the bleed nipple in. Going to put a bit of grease on the end of the nipple, bleed nipple. I'm going to stick the ball like so on there, and I'm going to offer it into the hole. We're just going to nip that up now so that it doesn't leak when we start to put fluid into the reservoir. Doesn't have to be terribly tight because we're going to have to loosen it for the bleeding process. And that is the wheel cylinder fitted. So we're now going to fit the rear shoes. We're going to do it the reverse thing. We're going to make sure that these are straight, all of the cuts. The spring or the holder for the spring is in the right spot, and we're going to make sure we're between the two studs so that we don't get jammed up. And we push the shoes in like so, kind of back to front, then we rotate them around until they're like that. We then have to pick up this pin here for the compensator. There, we push that on like so. We have to pick up the pin there. The self-adjuster has a hole in it, and we're going to pick up this pin up in there. So we push it on, like so, it slides on, and we push it inside there into the adjuster, making sure that our compensator rod is still on. So we're on the self-adjuster pin, we're in the slot of the wheel cylinder and of the adjuster. The bottom shoe's in place. Now we're going to work on the top shoe. We're going to push that into the slot there, and we'll lift that over there. This is the pull-off spring. You can see the shape of it there. This hooks into the clip in the backing plate, and this goes over the shoe at that point there. We'll put it through. We'll put our finger up behind the shoe, pull the shoe away a little bit. So you can see the way I'm pulling down on the spring, how that is indeed in the clip. Because if it wasn't in the clip, it would hook all the way through. So you know you're there. We're going to push the expander in out of the way, push our spring through. This nut stud's getting in our way, so we move that out of the way. Now we've got to pull down. You get hold of it. You pull down, and there you can see at that point there, the hook is around, or that spring is around there. So now those shoes are fitted, everything's on. So we're going to make a check now. I spoke earlier about how the self-adjuster also acts on the pin to keep the shoes straight against the drum. So what we do is I take a steel rule and a square, a tri-square, and I just nip them together lightly with a small pair of vice grips, just nicely, and I lay that on there, and I look along the shoe at this point here. I'm looking through there on this line, through there, and with the light behind me, I can look in there and I can see that that shoe is flush, so that would be square to the drum. If it were laying over this way, and there was light at that end of the tri-square, I'd let it back in a bit. If it was too far in, or I should say if it was too far out, the light would be at this end of the tri-square and I would let it in. To adjust it, we'd take the rubber bungs out of the backing plate and move this washer in or out. The washer would push the shoe back and forth like that by screwing it in or screwing it out, would change the plane of the brake shoe. So we'll check both of these. These are in good shape. I'll just go around so that I pick up both of these lugs there. I'll check under there, and those shoes are both square. We now need to adjust the compensator. I'm just going to demonstrate to you how this compensator works. What I've done is I've got the square driver on the back, and you can see how that bottom shoe comes in and out towards the drum. And what we'll do is we'll put the drum on, and then I'll set that up, and you'll be able to see the difference it makes. Before we put the drum on, we'll just recap. You can see we have the short part of the lining just above the cylinder here, and the short part of the lining just under the expander at the bottom. That's how it should be. Before we can make any adjustments inside the drum, we need to take this pin out and allow the two compensator rods to float. We'll just rough that up to give that a good bite. We turn it around, have 3 holes for the screws. We align that with the 3 holes there. We slip that on. Take our drum screws. So when we've got all the screws in and the drum's home, what we're going to do now is we left the adjuster loose. So we're going to take the adjuster and we're going to tighten the shoes hard up against the drum. And when I say we're going to tighten them up hard, I really mean we want to make them as tight as we possibly can. What this is doing is squeezing the shoes against the drum and centralizing the adjuster. The drum's long since stopped turning, but we still continue to put pressure as much as we possibly can. I'm even using my thick wrench so that we get it really tight. Now I'm going to do the bolts up as tight as I possibly can, and that's how we centralize that part of the adjustment, or the adjuster. And then I'm going to let it off till it just moves. You see, we've got that just moving now. We'll go back to the compensator, the square on the back, and we take that and we can make the wheel stop moving. And what that's done is that's pushed that shoe down against the drum. And we're going to, I'm taking the square off the back, I'm putting a wrench on the lock nut. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to lift the shoe away from the drum, just the tiniest amount. And then I'm going to hold the square and tighten my lock nut. And what that's done is it's given us a very minimum clearance there with the shoe, and that will give us a lot less brake pedal travel. Okay, once we've adjusted inside the drums, it's now necessary to make sure that the adjustment on this rod is correct. This is the rod from the brake pedal, and this will affect directly the amount of travel at the brake pedal. So we're going to remove as much of the free play as we can. We're going to pull against the rods, we push with our thumb here and we check to see whether or not the pin will line up. So we push in, take away all that free play, and we slip the pin in. Once we're happy with that, if we felt we're pulling too much, we can take this rod and we can adjust it like so, by the adjustment through there, or we can take it in and shorten the adjustment like so. It's a good idea to take away all of the free play, and I even take a tapered punch and pull against the linkage. This gives us a really good pedal, and it makes a difference. So this is where we do the adjustment. And that's the rods adjusted. You've seen us, we've completed the left rear wheel. We went on and we did the right rear wheel. We're now going to do the fronts. I'm going to fit the backing plate to the stub axle and the hoses to the bracket on the shock absorbers. Going to put the lock tab and the bolt. To wiggle it around a little bit. Get the bolt started. So we get all the bolts in, we can tighten them up. Once we've got those tight, we can bend the lock tabs back up. We're now ready to put our hoses in. What I'm going to do is the same as before. I'm going to just start the locking nut, the nut that holds the hose to the bracket. And what we do at this point is we get this hose in a good position for the shape as the wheel turns back and forth. This hose needs to have an arc up towards the bracket, like so, and then we'll double check the line, the fitting. That's that done. You need to, as I said earlier, need to do that one, and then we'll do this one after. Once again, taking the locking nut in. And while I've still got plenty of movement, I'll bring the pipe fitting to it. Start that. So I'll take the locking nut now in. Make sure that my hoses are uniform, they're both the same, that point. Then I'm going to lock up the fitting. Oops. And we'll go back on. So everything's tight there. For the purpose of demonstration, I'm going to put the shoes on now. This is going to show you how the hole in the back of the shoe goes onto the post, the adjusting post for the shoe. Once again, we take the lining, pull the spring around, offer that in. Take my pliers at this end of the shoe, on the post. You can see that slides down. Push that all the way back down so that the drum will go on. We may have to encourage that back a little more yet. We take the bottom one, pull the spring towards you, put the spring through the hole, pick up the post, watch the movement there as the friction washers come through, and that's the shoes on. I'm going to have to put the hub on now, although I can see the shoes are too far out, so I think I'm going to let them in. It'll give you an opportunity to see them move. You can see the shoe coming in or going away from me towards the backing plate using a screwdriver, and that's basically the adjustment. I'm going to do the same with the top one. The shoe's going in towards the backing plate there. And we're probably enough now. We'll put the hub together. So it's very, very important that we force grease right through the rollers on the wheel bearing. So we're going to keep punching the grease into the bearing. You can see it coming through there, through the rollers, and then we know the grease is right in there. Go all the way round. Take the grease back out of the centre, point there, and you can see the grease coming through the bearing. You can see we've packed that bearing. We'll take a small amount, put it round the outside. I'll place that on a clean rag. I'll take the outer bearing, which is a little smaller but still very strong, heavy, and we'll punch some fresh grease into that. See that coming through. It's very important, as I said earlier, to get the grease into that bearing. Just spreading it on the outside doesn't cut it. The bearing will fail. And we'll spread that around. I'm going to put this beveled washer. You can see we have a bevel on the washer there and a bevel in here. Knock that bit of dirt out of there. We put the bevel in so the flat side is facing the bearing. We have an oil thrower or grease thrower. It has a small thread in there instead of a seal. It has a thread so as the hub spins, any grease that comes out is forced back into the hub. Let's put the big bearing on the onto the inner, and then I'm going to put the thrower in there. So I've banged the thrower into the hub, and the hub will slide on through there. There's no point in packing a lot of grease inside the hub. It won't travel. If it does travel, the bearing's well and truly overheated, so there's no need to do that. We've got plenty of grease in the bearing. Push the outer race on, and then we've got the washer. The washer has a tab in which to locate the slot. Again, well, as I told you when we took it off, it's left-hand thread, left-hand side of the car. And we're going to tighten the bearing up. we're going to do is take it in. You want to make the bearing fairly tight. You certainly don't want any play or any looseness. The heat transfers out through the drum, through the hub. So if this bearing's loose, you're going to overheat the bearing. So pull it in. If it's a new bearing, it needs to be somewhat tighter, but just because we've only packed these. We've got the cotter pin or split pin. You can see I've twisted this split pin, and the reason for doing that is when we put it into the hole, it allows the legs to come back around. Inside the dust cover, there's a static electricity grounding arrangement, and you can see that somebody's taken this one off, and that's because they bend the lock tab, or the split pin I should say, back on itself and to there, and that causes that to break off, and that's what's happened there. So I've bent this around. We'll take this like so. That's that. Gentle pressure. And that's the hub built. Now we're going to true up the brake linings, or the brake shoes, I should say. You can see down through there the gap along that edge there is pretty even. And we'll try this one here. They're pretty good there. And we're pretty... We could let the top one in just a little bit too. We're going to take a deep socket and we'll tighten up the lock nuts. Now that I've adjusted the shoes for the position on the drum, I'm going to put the grommets in the backing plate, and they're just slipped in. That completes that. So now we're ready to sand the inside of the drum and fit the drum to the hub. So we'll break the glaze on the drum. Tap the dirt out of it, then we can fit it to the hub. We'll fit our screws. Tighten our screws up. So now we're ready to complete the other side, and then we'll be ready to bleed the brakes. To bleed the brakes, connect a rubber tube to the bleed nipple, undo the bleed nipple, and have your assistant pump the master cylinder lever forwards until you remove all the air from the system. Could you pump, please? When all the air stops coming, you can close off the nipple. The sequence for doing this is to bleed the left rear brake first, then the right rear. Then we're going to bleed the front cylinder on the left and the front cylinder on the right. This will have bled the large master cylinder. When you've done that, you're then going to bleed the low bleed nipple on the left cylinder and then the low bleed nipple on the right cylinder, and that will bleed the small master cylinder, and that's the sequence you do for bleeding the brakes. Well, that's it. We're ready to jack the car down and road test the car. Good luck with your project. Remember, it's a complicated one, so follow all the steps carefully, and we look forward to seeing you at the next program.
more information on other programs in this series or upcoming technical seminars, please contact us at the number on your screen.